Sometime around 2010, a 3D artist who went by Fractal Sponge posted renders of an Imperial supply ship he had built from scratch. The model shows 4,600 meters of angular gray hull, 6 external pill-shaped fuel containers bracketing the midsection like a cargo frame, 4 articulated refueling arms angled off the forward superstructure, and armament so sparse it would embarrass a frigate. He called it the Allure-class replenishment ship. He built it because he thought the Empire's logistics chain demanded one, because the question of how a fleet that size actually stays fueled in deep space had no official answer, and that bothered him. 2 years later, that ship appeared in an officially licensed Star Wars publication, with its name, its dimensions, and its role all intact. Lucas licensing came to him, not the other way around. The artist's real name is Ansel Xiao. He has his own Wikipedia article, the community's own encyclopedia, acknowledging him by name. Ansel Xiao is an artist who specializes in 3D modeling. His Imperial-class Star Destroyer render appeared in Star Wars Insider 125, a Lucasfilm-published magazine, before any formal arrangement existed. His gallery at fractalsponge.net runs at least 26 pages deep. Star Destroyers, frigates, dreadnoughts, carriers, gunships, fighters. He documented his earliest Star Wars CGI work himself, an Executor in 2001, an Imperial Star Destroyer in 2003, pieces built quietly, posted online, a decade before anyone from Lucasfilm called. He described his own design philosophy in a 2017 post on fractalsponge.net. I'm a nerd. I mean a proper, hardcore nerd, who cares about reactor volumes and power to weight, internal consistency to long-held headcanon, armor grazing angles. That isn't marketing language. That is a working methodology. When he models a ship, he starts with power generation, how much a reactor of that volume can produce, and then works outward. What kind of weapons can that power support? What shields does it allow? What speed does it enable? From one of his technical notes, power generation is the most important metric for a warship. Power gets turned into weapons fire, acceleration, and shielding. He builds from the inside out, the way an engineer would, not from the outside in, the way a concept artist typically does. That engineering-first obsession is exactly why Lucas Licensing called him. His designs didn't just look correct. They were internally coherent, dimensionally rigorous, and built from the same functional logic that gives the classic Imperial aesthetic its weight. Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston established that visual language in 1977. Angular geometry, gray palette, wedge silhouettes that communicate mass and doctrine in a single frame. The first shot of a Star Destroyer overhead in A New Hope doesn't need dialogue. The design carries the argument. Xiao didn't break that language. He extended it, from the inside out, the way an engineer would, filling in the gaps the films never needed to address, but the fans had been asking about for decades. On December 7th, 2015, he posted a gallery page on fractalsponge.net with the heading, Star Wars, Essential Guide to Warfare Work. His caption reads, "These are the pieces I made for the Star Wars Essential Guide to Warfare book. Some of these have been subsequently finished, or are renders of existing models." The book was published in 2012 by Lucas Licensing, written by Jason Fry, and it's the document that moved several of Xiao's fan designs from fanon into official Legends continuity. A commenter under that post put it plainly, "I'm glad that your work contributed to the Bellator, Secutor, etc. becoming part of the now Legends canon." The mechanism was Lucasfilm's Holocron database, an internal continuity archive, the binding reference for all Legends material. When Xiao submitted his designs, the names he had chosen and the dimensions he had calculated were entered into the Holocron. Once they were in there, they were binding. The FFG forum archive from 2017 records the community's own account of exactly what crossed over. The models made by Fractal Sponge were featured in the Essential Guide to Warfare, and the names and the sizes he'd chosen for them were added to the databank. But the weapons fit wasn't written up in detail. Names and dimensions officially canonized. Armament specifications officially left open. That distinction matters, and it becomes visible the moment you look at the official spec sheets for any of his ships. The Allure class is the clean case, the one where the origin story has no asterisks. Unlike almost everything else this script covers, the Allure didn't exist in any official publication before Ansel Shao created it. Wikipedia's own article states it plainly. The Allure class originated as a 2010 Fanon digital model by Ansel Shao. It then entered continuity, both in name and design. The community's own encyclopedia documenting a fan-to-official crossover without ambiguity. No background panel in a 1992 comic. No half-seen shape on screen. The ship was entirely his, from hull proportions to the spacing of the refueling arm attachment points. The render itself does the work visually. Pull up the fractalsponge.net gallery post, dated February 4th, 2015, and what you see is a ship that looks like a container vessel crossed with a naval auxiliary. A long, low, primary hull with the 6 spheroidal containers bracketed along its flanks. The forward section bearing those articulated arms like a space-based oil derrick. It doesn't look like a warship. That's the point. It reads as functional infrastructure, not combat hardware, which is exactly the Imperial design logic at work. This vessel exists to serve the fleet, not to fight. The ship is the largest dedicated support vessel in the Imperial fleet. At 4,600 meters long and 1,000 meters wide, it dwarfs the standard Imperial Star Destroyer by a factor of nearly 3 in length. The manufacturer was Coupe Drive Yards. The 6 external containers carry fuel. 4 articulated arms with multiple nozzles allow simultaneous refueling of 2 capital ships at once, the Navy equivalent of an underway replenishment vessel, keeping the battle fleet operational without returning to a base. Stern hangars accommodate frigate-scale vessels for deep space repair operations. Minimum crew, 220. Effective complement, 780. Cargo capacity, 20,000 metric tons. Consumables for 7 months. Cost when new, 20 million credits. Now the first thing that doesn't add up. A standard Imperial-class Star Destroyer, 1,600 meters, the backbone of the Imperial fleet, carries 60 heavy turbo-laser batteries and 60 ion cannons. The Allure class, nearly 3 times that length and orders of magnitude larger by volume, carries 5 twin heavy turbolasers and 8 light turbolasers. The biggest ship in the Imperial fleet has roughly 1/6 the armament density of the ship it exists to refuel. Its rear hangars can dock frigates for repair, but a coordinated starfighter attack on an isolated Allure could proceed without the attackers taking significant losses from its defenses. There is a tactical logic. The Allure isn't a combatant. But the official specifications don't explain why a hull that size couldn't accommodate more point defense batteries across those flanks. The Empire built planet-killing battle stations and argued that the threat of force was sufficient protection. The Allure class suggests they applied the same philosophy to their logistics chain, which is an interesting doctrine choice when the Rebel Alliance's primary strategy was disrupting exactly those supply lines. The Allure exists in both Legends continuity and current canon, meaning the Rebellion operated in a galaxy where the Empire's single largest vessel was also among its least defended. One Allure-class vessel on record by name? Pika's Pride, operating between 3 ABY and 4 ABY, used to transport 4 Rebel ships to Coruscant. A fan-designed ship, carrying Rebel cargo in active Star Wars continuity. The receipt doesn't get cleaner than that. The Secutor class is more complicated, and the complication is worth getting right. On February 18, 1992, Dark Horse Comics published Dark Empire 2. If you pulled that issue today and knew what you were looking for, you'd find it in the background of a panel. An unnamed ship, arrowhead-shaped hull, twin bridges positioned amidships on a vertical command superstructure, design lineage visibly closer to the Republic's Venator class than to the Imperial Wedge that followed it. Wide in plan form, relatively shallow in depth, the kind of hull that says carrier before it says anything else. It had no name, no specifications, no dialogue, no role in the story. A background shape in a panel from 3 decades ago. That unnamed silhouette sat in comics limbo for approximately 20 years. Picture what Xiao actually did with it. He takes a low-resolution panel image, studies the proportions, makes decisions about what the 3-dimensional object behind the 2-dimensional drawing would actually need to look like. He establishes a length, 2,200 meters, longer than the Imperial-class Star Destroyer that replaced the design lineage it descends from. He works out the internal volume, determines how many fighter berths could fit inside those ventral hangars based on the hull geometry, calculates what reactor output a ship of that displacement would require, and then he gives it a name, Secutor. He gives it a role, the Empire's largest dedicated carrier. He gives it a crew, 40,000 officers, pilots, and enlisted. He gives it a place in the fleet doctrine that connects it directly to the Venator it evolved from, and the Imperial class that replaced them both. Then he submits those specifications to Lucas Licensing, and they go into the holocron. What Star Wars fans now know as the Secutor class, its 2,200-meter length, its 40,000-person crew, its identity as the Empire's largest dedicated carrier, those came from him. In 2014, James Luceno's novel Tarkin name-dropped the Secutor class, pulling the designation from Legends into current canon. A fan's chosen name is now permanently embedded in the galaxy far, far away. The ship deserves a full breakdown. Length, 2,200 meters, manufactured by Kuat Drive Yards, introduced approximately 19 to 20 BBY, the closing weeks of the Clone Wars or the earliest days of the Empire. The FFG Star Wars RPG Wiki describes it as perhaps the largest dedicated starfighter carrier in the Imperial arsenal, an old design from the earliest days of the Imperial Navy. Crew, 40,000 officers, pilots, and enlisted. Troops, 14,000. Official starfighter complement, 144 fighters in 2 wings. Construction cost, 200 million credits. Primary hyperdrive, Class 2. Backup hyperdrive, Class 14. Armament, per official sources, 15 heavy turbolaser batteries, 15 light turbolasers, 10 battleship-class ion cannon turrets, distributed port and starboard, 5 ventral battleship-class ion cannon batteries, 16 medium ion cannons, and 12 hull-mounted heavy tractor beam emitters. 2 ventral hangar bays dominate the lower hull. The visual design connects directly to the Venator. Twin command towers amidships, blunted arrowhead planform, making it the evolutionary link between Republic carrier doctrine and the Imperial fleet that eventually replaced it. Now the contradictions, because there are several, and they're layered. The backup hyperdrive is Class 14. In the Legends hyperdrive system, Class 1 is standard for fast ships. Class 2 is common for warships. Class 14 means a journey a Class 1 ship completes in 1 day takes 14 days on backup. For a capital warship potentially deployed in the deep outer rim, that backup hyperdrive doesn't serve any practical emergency function. You can't retreat under fire on it. You can't reach a repair facility in any reasonable time frame. If your primary drive fails during a fleet engagement in the outer rim, a Class 14 backup puts you on a weeks-long crawl toward the nearest shipyard, while whatever disabled you in the first place circles for a second pass. A Class 14 backup on a ship of this size functions as a hyperdrive in name only. The fighter complement is where the gap between official numbers and design intent becomes most visible, and the community caught it immediately. Xiao designed the Secutor with 8 to 10 wings of TIE fighters, 576 to 720 fighters based on the geometry of the actual model. When the ship's specifications were published officially, the number became 144, 2 wings. Comments on the fractalsponge.net 4K render post noted this directly. Fractal originally intended the Secutor to have 8 to 10 wings when he designed it, but when it became Legends, people started messing with the numbers, and now its official complement is 2 wings. The FFG forum thread analyzed the model's visible hangar geometry and put minimum capacity at 576 fighters. The official stat is less than a quarter of that. When a commenter on the 4K render post asked Xiao about the Secutor's power generation, he responded with a single figure: 2.5 times 10 to the 25th power watts. That is 2.5 times 10 to the 25th power watts. To put that in physical terms, the total luminosity of the sun is approximately 3.8 times 10 to the 26th watts, meaning Xiao calculated that his 2,200 meter carrier produces roughly 6% of the sun's total energy output. He calculated that. For a ship that at the time had no official existence beyond a background panel in a 1992 comic. That is the engineering rigor that made Lucas Licensing call him. The classification contradiction is less dramatic, but still real. The Secutor is larger than the 1,600 meter Imperial-class Star Destroyer, yet it carries the designation Star Destroyer. Under the Anaxis War College system used in Legends classification, a hull of that size should sit in the battlecruiser category. Multiple community sources identified this explicitly. The ship is sized like a battlecruiser, but designated like a destroyer. Official sources give it the destroyer label anyway, likely because the carrier role shaped the classification decision rather than the hull dimensions. A 2,200 meter ship, classified below its own size class, is exactly the kind of thing this audience will check against every comparable hull in the database. One additional inconsistency in the armament entry itself. Official Wikipedia Legends sources list the ion cannon armament as 10 battleship-class ion cannon turrets, 5 port, 5 starboard, and separately 5 battleship-class ion cannon batteries, ventral, for a total of 15 emplacements. Other compiled sources compress this to 15 battleship-class ion cannons, without distinguishing turrets from batteries. Whether those are 10 plus 5 separate emplacements with consistent nomenclature, or 15 total with inconsistent labeling across sources, isn't resolved in official material. The distinction between a turret and a battery matters for fire coverage arcs, reload rates, and crew requirements. The official sources leave it ambiguous, which means any fleet doctrine built around that armament profile is working from an incomplete picture. The Allure and Secutor have the strongest paper trail, but the FFG forum archive from 2017 makes clear the roster runs wider. The community thread titled Ship Stats, Fractal Sponge's Imperial Capital Ships, posted by user Winchester3 in February 2017, opens with a specific claim. Several of the ships in the printed Age of Rebellion books were originally designed and named by 3D artist Fractal Sponge, aka Ansel Xiao, based on various more or less indistinct blobs from the background in the early 1990s Dark Horse comics. This includes both of the Imperial Silhouette 9 ships, the Praetor II and the Assertor. The Assertor-class Star Dreadnought, 15 kilometers long, Kuat drive yards, designed around 24 fighter wings, 72 fighters per wing, 1,728 total. Primary hyperdrive, Class 2, backup, Class 12. Xiao projected crew at roughly 500,000. The Winchester 3 analysis describes it as an executor done right, with weapons and hangar capacity scaled to the actual internal volume of a 15-kilometer warship, rather than the comparatively anemic official loadout of the Executor class at a similar scale. The Assertor entered the FFG Age of Rebellion sourcebooks. Its name came from fractalsponge.net. The Praetor II class star battlecruiser, 6,500 meters in Xiao scaling. Its visual origin, a background shape in an early 1990s Dark Horse Comics panel. He worked out the ball turret arrangement, established the armament structure, gave it a crew in the hundreds of thousands, and it entered the same official sourcebooks with his numbers attached. The Winchester 3 analysis notes the ship is a very strange design to start with, but strange or not, the name and dimensions that appear in official material are Xiao's. The Vigil-class corvette also appears in that thread as a fractal sponge design present in official printed material, with official stats that diverged from the actual model geometry, consistent with what happened to the Secutor's fighter complement. The pattern isn't coincidental. Names and dimensions crossed into the holocron. Armament and internal specifics were rewritten by whoever handled the official write-up. Wikipedia maintains an actual page titled List of Fanon Elements in Continuity, tracking instances where fan-originated material entered official Star Wars. The fact that such a page exists, actively maintained across multiple years, is a measure of how often this boundary has been crossed, not just by Xiao, but across the wider fan community that has been contributing to Star Wars lore in ways that official acknowledgement has rarely matched. The Essential Guide to Warfare Pathway. Lucas licensing approaching Xiao, his designs entering the holocron, his name attached in the credits, was a formal arrangement, a two-way relationship, however unequal, an officially sanctioned crossing of the fan-to-canon line. A second pathway exists and looks different in almost every way. Xiao's Allegiance-class Heavy Star Destroyer is an original fan design posted on fractalsponge.net. That design subsequently appeared in Rise of Skywalker promotional material without attribution. Separate YouTube documentation specifically identified the Allegiance class. A concurrent controversy involving Star Wars artist Joe Caroni included allegations that his work, and work from other fan modelers in the same community, had been incorporated into official Star Wars books without credit or compensation. An artist who worked under the Valdrakken Ord studio during its FFG production period documented the pattern directly. Work produced between 2011 and 2014 appeared in print without credit, and some artists within the studio used other creators' pieces to apply for jobs without their knowledge. The FFG production pipeline in that period apparently consumed a volume of visual work that outpaced its crediting practices. 2 tracks then, same community, same artist at the center of both. Track 1. Lucas Licensing identifies your work as valuable enough to build an official sourcebook around, contacts you, and your ship names and dimensions enter the holocron, with your involvement acknowledged. Track 2. Your design appears in official Star Wars promotional or licensed material, and your name does not appear anywhere near it. Both happened to Ansel Xiao. Sometimes the fan gets the call. Sometimes they get the panel. The standard assumption about how Star Wars ships get made runs roughly like this. Lucasfilm and its licensed partners decide what exists, what it's called, and what it can do. The community receives that information, documents it on Wikipedia, argues about it on forums, and builds lore and headcanon around the official record. The flow runs one direction. The documented record doesn't fully support that assumption. The Altar-class replenishment ship was designed by a fan in 2010 and entered official continuity in 2012 because Lucas Licensing asked him to submit it. His hull, his name, his dimensions. The Secutor class's identity, its 2,200-meter length, its 40,000-person crew, its role as the Empire's largest dedicated carrier, the name that James Luceno used in a 2014 canon novel, was established by that same fan, applied to a nameless background shape from a 1992 comic. The Assertor-class Star Dreadnought and the Praetor II-class Star Battlecruiser entered official FFG Age of Rebellion sourcebooks carrying Xiao's scaling and naming decisions. The Vigil-class corvette. The fleet on the page carries, in multiple places, the dimensions of a freelance artist in possession of a fractalsponge.net domain, and a methodology for calculating reactor output. He described that methodology plainly. caring about reactor volumes and power to weight, internal consistency to long-held headcanon, armor grazing angles. That rigor, the same rigor that produced a power generation figure of 2.5 times 10 to the 25th power watts for a ship that had no official existence beyond a nameless background panel, is why the names and numbers he chose were the ones that went into the holocron database and stayed there. Wikipedia tracking fanon elements in continuity. Official Star Wars Insider featuring his renders before any formal deal. Lucas Licensing making the first call. The community thread from 2017 quietly documenting which ships came from him and which official stats diverged from his original geometry. This isn't circumstantial. The receipts exist, they're findable, and they point the same direction. The Imperial fleet this community has analyzed, argued over, and built encyclopedic lore around wasn't entirely designed by Lucasfilm. Parts of it, the largest dedicated supply vessel, the Empire's biggest carrier, several of the dreadnoughts at the top of the size chart, were designed by a fan who did the math on his own time, posted it to a website named after a geometric concept, and eventually got a call from Lucas Licensing asking if they could use his work. That's the documented case. Those are the receipts. Subscribe for more stories like this one.